big warm welcome to the SRMC Tribe Podcast. Our first guest is Sharif, or affectionately known as Omar, the original creator of the SRMC course, a proper origin story for us perhaps, and now working in the cyberspace as a bit of a cyber rock star. You're going to enjoy this one. Thanks, Sharif, for agreeing to do the first podcast. First of many, I suppose. Obviously, been years of people have been asking us to do a podcast, and we decided to do one around the SRMC Tribe, and you being the original creator or designer of the first course, thought it only fit in for you to sort of give your story, a little bit of your background, and why we decided to ask you to be the first guest. I thought it would be a good way of starting, and thanks for doing it.
Welcome, mate.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me. Yeah. So, where do you want me to...
Pretty fitting, mate. I think probably the story of, not necessarily story Frontier, but the story that took Frontier into another place is the SRMC.
Yep.
And that's probably not quite the beginning for you and Pete, 'cause obviously you knew each other in training, but that's where the SRMC story starts. So maybe go with that and then we'll work backwards.
Okay, so I suppose it probably has to start with the first phone call from Pete as to how I ended up with what was known as Marsec International then, which obviously has now evolved into Frontier Risks. So Pete and I, in separate situations, were working in the maritime security space. So, anti-piracy work, against the Somali-based piracy stuff that was happening many, many years ago. And Pete basically founded a company, Marsec International, and I had a typical sort of Pete fashioned message. I hadn't spoke to him in 11 years. Get a message saying, "How's things, mate?"
I don't think it was 11 years, but okay.
Before we go on that, mate, just for those, because there'll be people in the audience.
Was it not 11 years? It must have been.
Mate, it probably was. But for those that don't know, tell us a bit about piracy, mate, what that was, because people don't necessarily know that.
Yeah,
the whole industry was built on. I know there's loads of bootnecks.
Yeah, no, there was a massive industry built. So if you look at the sort of private security industry, in our memory, I suppose you had post-war Iraq. You had all of the PSD, personal security detail work that sort of erupted, if you will, to support oil workers and other NGOs and other organisations operating in that space. So they needed private security. I suppose a couple of years after that had boomed, you then had the Somali-based piracy problem start to. I mean, and it was early days of that was sort of around 2006, I think, and then it was sort of about 2010, if you will. It went mainstream, and then there was companies that were formed off the back of it, who would effectively hire anyone who was an ex-Marine. That was the start. One company in particular obviously only hired former Royal Marines, and basically that was their brand, and that was how they were able to secure some of the contracts in the early days. However, as things start to standardise, you had, I think it was either Lloyd's of London or the Lloyd's Register who basically said that there needed some form of standardisation, not only just from a training standpoint, but just from a standard standpoint. So you had best management practices, form on just how you would secure a vessel. It was a pretty complex environment. Effectively you're moving weapons from one nation to another, which in Old English maritime law was essentially gun running.
Yeah, you weren't far off that at the start, was it?
Well, it wasn't.
Weapons
No,
overboard.
Yeah. And then you had all the Arab uprising as well, where ports would then shut and wouldn't allow you to have your weapons in there. So when you start to evolve, and not only that, you start. How do you discern a fisherman from a pirate? They're both operating in the same small boat or a skiff. There was some clear indicators, twin outboard engines, things like that, whether they were operating from a mothership or a mother dhow. So whilst in the early days you could just turn up, and provided you didn't start blowing people out of the water, but there had to be an element of standardisation. Just because you're a Royal Marine doesn't mean that necessarily all Royal Marines had served on ships before. So it's understanding your way around.
Oh, very few.
That was the best black, wasn't it?
Well,
correct. You had.
Yeah, and then obviously you had to secure that vessel if you were ever boarded. So there was a whole lot of complexity to it. Anyway, so Pete's company, we digress. So I'd sort of developed training to train up the guys to operate in that space. I had a call. It just said, do you fancy developing some training for us? I said, yeah, why not? And I think that's the key really for me was, I'd been working on the ships for a couple of years at this point, or 18 months or so at this point. And, as great as it was, you get to see new areas of the world. It's not a forever job, and you've got to try and find ways in which to improve yourself and earn money in other ways as well and diversify yourself. And hands down, it was, the best move I'd made for the start of my career because, it was interesting because when Pete sort of texted me, I thought, oh, yeah, okay, same. It's like lads ring you up and say, yeah, I've got this going on. And anyway, I didn't hear from him for about 3 months. I remember, and I thought, oh, there we go, same old. And then I had a call from him, and I'll never forget it. So I had a sort of call from him out of the blue 3 months after this initial interaction. He said, what are you doing tomorrow? I was like, oh, nothing. He said, can you get down to Tiverton in Devon? He says, I need you to deliver some training for me. I was like, yeah, okay. He said, I'll just, again, say yes, work the rest out later. I said, what is it? He said, conflict management. I was like, yeah, okay. I'll, what's conflict management? And he said, don't worry about it. He said, I'll send you some slides, but listen, it's really, really important. This is quite political. He said, it needs to last the full day. So I'm based in the Midlands. So I'm thinking I've got to drive down to Devon. I've got to learn a day's worth of content on a subject I don't really know what it's about. But at least he's sending me some slides. Typical Pete fashion.
He didn't even know how to work a computer then, did he?
No.
Well, still struggling now, to be fair.
Well. So anyway, I get these slides through. There's 40 PowerPoint slides, no notes, and about 5 bullet points on each slide. So great PowerPoint deck. I'm thinking, right, I'm going to have to rewrite this course overnight. And anyway, fast forward, we got through it successfully-ish. Well, he invited me back the next day, the next week to come up. So anyway, we got through it. And he said, well, what are you doing next week? And I said, well, nothing much. He said, well, come up. He said, I've not seen you in a while. He said, come up. I've got a few items you can help me out with. And one of them, then the next thing was to build out the Maritime Security Operators course. So City and Guilds had sort of released the curriculum, and now this was starting to move into a bit more of my skill set. So, helped by I don't know if we redesigned the course there or whether it was I can't remember, but
there's a few flown about.
Yeah, I think you had to design a course around the framework that you'd sort of given.
Something along those lines.
Coming up with.
Yeah. And so for me, I really saw that was my route out of now working on the ships because I'd done that. It was great fun, but really I had to try and step away from that. But, previously to that, I had done a security management course with another provider, a competitor, which I think will probably steer how we got to the SRMC. So for me, I really was trying to look and diversify out of being an operator, if you will, on the ships. So, we were doing quite a bit with the maritime security stuff. We were probably a little bit of a rogue outfit, but we were getting there in terms of what we were trying to do. We were definitely punching above our weight in many areas. And then, I was doing quite a bit then on the delivery of those courses, and there was a tender that had come through. I think this is how we moved into the SRMC, and there was a tender that had come through. So we were part of a larger group. What do we talk about?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. So we were part of a larger group called PGI at the time, and PGI had a maritime security company, which was known as PVI. It had an intelligence company. It had a training organisation, MARSEC.
Technology, cyber, a few different areas.
Yeah, there was a few areas that it was starting to evolve in, and just trying to bring all of that together. I think the challenge with that was you're trying to get a whole load of organisations to merge And then ultimately we would underpin that with training, whether that was journey management and travel risk management, whether that was training up maritime security operators, and then in the cyberspace, which was eventually where I ended up in. So the whole of the things we were trying to mesh together. But anyway, this tender had come through. It was a Middle Eastern government organisation that had to rapidly upskill, its Coast Guard. And I had just done, a security risk management course, and I said, Pete, we can do this. We can put together the framework. Let's just win. And I think this was the story of our lives. Like, just win it, say yes, and we will work the rest out later. And that's pretty much exactly what we did, and we won it. And I think it was, it was a pretty substantial contract, wasn't it, for PGI. So then came the challenge of, well, and unfortunately with these sort of government tenders, they take quite a bit of time to come together. But what we had identified is that we now, just through brute force, we now need a different kind of security operator. We now need security managers. We need security consultants. So Pete had sort of attended a board meeting, and we effectively agreed to build the SRMC. So we had to build our own security risk management course. So Pete comes back, he says, I've just agreed we're going to do it. He said, you've got 3 months to build it. I was like, okay, right, gulp, we'll do that. So this must have been around about the August time, and then it was just all hands on deck. So we knew we had to build something. We'd promised that we were going to do it in 3 months, and this was 2013. Now, I can't remember. There was a few other things that led to the decision for us to do this, but I do remember, one of the things that I'd sort of said to Pete was, I've just done this course. I spent $6,000 of my own money, which in 2012 was a lot of money anyway, full stop. So I'd spent $6,000 of my own money, and it was the market leading course out there, which was the competitor to the SRMC. And I'd sort of come off there and I'd said, look, there's a few things around that course that I didn't like. I felt a little bit like it, whilst it taught you a heck of a lot, it was dining out, if you will, on the old Iraq PSD days. It was dining out a lot on the Nigerian oil and gas space. That was another area that PGI were trying to get involved in. And I just felt you had a whole bunch of old and bold security managers who had built a course and then were charging a heck of a lot of money to then prep people to go into that space. But anyone who knows anything about that space, it was definitely an old boys network. You weren't breaking into it easily. And then I think if you were going to do some of the embedded consultancy, if you weren't a former officer, for example, that just a whole lot of things went against you. And then there was also one other thing that really, I suppose, irked me and really motivated me to try and do something a little bit better for what we were going to do with the SRMC. And that was, I think the biggest part is the alumni. One of the things that this organisation said was, well, come down, you can come to our offices and, we'll meet you after and see if there's any work. But they were pretty much paying lip service to that. It wasn't, I went down there and I just felt that they were doing something to just say they were doing it. So I was probably one of the only people that took them up on that. So I thought, well, if we're going to do this, you can't promise people jobs. You can't do that. But what you can do is guarantee a network. And, those that have done the SRMC will know that once you join that network, then you can help each other out. Your job's done then as the instructors and you as the Frontier Risks team. You've handed it over to them and they'll help each other out. But they know they've all done the hard yards together, sat in a classroom. So that for me was one of the major things. But yeah, we did have a purpose to try and build it, and then it was just scrambling to try and build it. So I know it's quite a lot.
Your head was on fire, mate, I remember.
Yeah, massively.
Pretty stressful time.
Forgotten a lot of the stuff you even said then.
But it was definitely a say yes and work the rest out later. And we knew we could do it. I had a framework in which to be able to do it. And one of the things that I really knew I had to do, which was very different to the previous course I did, was I only know one part or several parts of this. The value is bringing in the world's best people that you can find on the let's be honest, the shoestring budget we had to try and build it. But there were certain things I couldn't teach, so I had to pull in somebody else to do that and somebody else to do that.
That's where we're fortunate at PGI to have access to some, pretty big hitters.
100%.
Former sort of trainer from MI6 and people like that were on the part of the organisation, which if you went to go after those people, you'd probably get a straight no anyway.
Correct.
So that in it to build that course in the early days and have access to those people to support it, that was a big game changer, I think.
It was critical, and it was the key differentiator, and it's still the differentiator today. I think you guys are pulling leading experts from all over the industry, and I think where it's evolved now, which I think you should be most proud of, and I certainly am, is that people will volunteer to do that because they know it's a good platform for them to be able to get their point across in many areas. Well, I volunteered, don't I? So there.
It's time to get you back.
So that was the history of how we did it.
What about, because we're sort of skipping over it, we're going to try and go back a bit, but what about, obviously we all served at the same sort of time in the Royal Marines, in training similar times, sort of 99, 2000?
2001 joined, yeah.
So obviously you and Pete know each other from back then. Obviously I met you later in down the line, but might be quite good to just jump back before we go forward into the SRMC and where you are now, into those days.
I could probably start you off.
Go on, Pete, you start.
We're both 813 troop, P059 when they still had P0 numbers, which was 23 years ago now. Both of us being Welshmen. Obviously most people probably can't tell you're Welsh.
No, half Welsh.
Yeah, so obviously a bit of a connection then, and just kids when we started, and obviously we didn't really, obviously went through training together, but didn't really. I think we met. I'm not sure if I met you. No, we might have seen each other in Iraq quickly, and then saw you just as you were leaving. When I got to 4-2, you were going up the gate to leave, and I probably left about a year after you then. But I don't think we actually met each other all the way.
No, because we served in different units. So once we've gone through training, you went to 40 Commando, I went to 4-2 Commando in Plymouth. So had different careers. I specialised as a heavy weapons mortar operator.
Specialise is a strong word.
That's another one it'll probably shock a few people.
Well, I think that would shock a few people. Yeah,
cyber world that he's a former mortarman.
And especially the role I had on a mortar, it was the least technical role you could
carrying
it. Well, yeah.
Pick the smallest boat to carry it.
Correct. Yeah. And that was it really. My career was served in Iraq. Couple of tours in Norway, spent a year in Diego Garcia.
I want to mention that.
Should pause there, mate, and talk about that.
For people, probably a lot of people don't know, obviously he was on the news recently, Diego Garcia. Tell people what Diego Garcia is.
So it's a strategically very, and bearing in mind I was there at the age of 21 and cared not for what I was, for why we were there. But effectively it's British Indian Ocean territory. So it is British sovereign island that is leased out to the US military, and it's strategically very important to the US because it's one of the key areas in the world where they can fly their B-1, B-52 sort of bombing missions, which obviously in the Middle East, they could take off, refuel, and they could run 24-hour, bombing missions and come back. But we, as the Royal Marines on the island, were the Island Protection Force, so weirdly enough, we ended up having to dual hat. So, we would come together 1 week of every month as a sort of commando detachment, if you will.
40 of you, is it?
So it was 40 Brits, 40 odd Brits. 22 of us were Royal Marines. The other were sort of Navy personnel. So they would be the police, Well, anyway, so we would dual hat. So there obviously isn't a day job really for you as a Royal Marine. So you would do your 1 week of every month, you'd do something called Britops. So if you think about it, it's an archipelago of islands. So you'd have 100 odd islands, and I'm talking pristine. I mean, in terms of
it's
stunning,
like nice holiday stuff.
Beautiful, yeah. And we did some cool stuff out there. So you do sort of fishery protections, so we had quite a lot of illegal poaching of fish. Sea cucumbers was a massive problem. So you'd have Sri Lankan fishing boats come and poaching the sea cucumbers to then sell back to China. So, we ended up doing some arrests in that space. You would run customs and excise, so you'd have yachts, mooring up. And, so you would sort of collect their tax tariffs, if you will, and you sort of get to know them there. So you do that one week every month. And you didn't do that. You only did that a couple of times when you're on the island because it's spread across a couple of the lads. You'd do a 1 week of training. I mean, some of the training we would do was brilliant out there because, well, not only that, you're on an island with Americans, so you've got to make sure that you step up. Number one, and number two, it's there's nothing else to do, and you know what it's like when you're back home and you're in a commando unit. Sometimes you get lost to training because there's so much other things going on. So it was really valuable training I found there, and a real tight knit team. Like you really did sort of come together, and I think that, to be fair, was the end of my career. Then I thought, well, I'll go back to 4-2, be a perfectly good nobody again, and for me that was it. So yeah, that was pretty much my career.
Didn't you when you dressed in tropical rig, like sort of eat off hot mum sort of style?
Yeah. So the rig was a little bit pesty. I'm not going to lie. So yeah, so you'd wear these sort of your grey, your shirts, your shorts. You'd have these socks. Oh, so that sorry, I didn't mention about the doubling up. So you double up. So I was a customs officer as well. So I did customs and excise, and I'd wear these socks up to my knees, and would do the customs excise. Some of the lads would be police officers, and the reason for that is you're billeted in a different way. So I come from a mortars background, so no heavy weapons on the island, so I had to have a day job, if you will. There were lads in there who were landing craftsmen. They would do their day jobs, so the LCs, you had a PW, so that
you're actually having to do work there, because I thought it was just a chill out draft. Where
it was a bit of a chill out. I mean, I'm probably overstating, I'm making it sound probably cooler than it was in many ways.
It's kind of a reward, though, isn't it? Like lads, that's how lads saw it, and normally people used to apply for it, didn't they? Because nobody thought you'd never get it.
Correct.
And it's it might be
the dream draft,
and it's rumoured to be that sort of where they do America's do rendition and stuff.
It was. I mean, we never saw any.
How many Americans are there?
5,000 Americans, I think. Yeah, it's a massive US airbase. I think it's like a secondary landing strip for NASA. It's strategically very, very important. But it's all up in the air at the minute as to what's going on there.
Because if I might be slightly wrong here, somebody probably correct me. Didn't the British government trick the sort of local population, which weren't actually the historic, they weren't the actual natives, to leave the island for some reason? Then they classed it as a wildlife reserve, which meant they couldn't go back, or something along how they sort of.
There's a lot of controversy around how we took that. I mean, there's controversy about British history, full stop, and colonialism and all that stuff. But I think it was the last colonised British territory in like the 60s. I think it was taken 65 or something along those lines.
It's also the secondary space landing craft backup, isn't it?
Yeah, I just said that. Secondly. Yeah, I do have an interesting story that we were there in 2004, 2005, and when the tsunami had hit Sri Lanka, it hit Thailand and came swooping down, and it was Christmas Day, obviously, and in typical British fashion, we celebratory day in the sun. But little did we know what was going on around us, because I hardly ever really watched the news. I was too busy having fun. And and apparently my phone had been going all day in my room, and it was my mother trying to get hold of me, and she was in sort of hysterics, like, blah blah blah. I've been trying to get hold of you all day, so on and so forth. Because as far as she was aware, I was smack bang in the centre of the Indian Ocean, and this massive tsunami had sort of wiped out the Indian Ocean, and we were very fortunate because there was a trench about 100 miles east of us. Oh, sorry, there was either a 100-foot trench or there was a trench 100 miles or something like that to the east of us, and it basically sucked up the entire thing because Diego Garcia's highest point is 7 meters above sea level.
Oh, man,
so we'd have been
gone.
Yeah, we'd have been completely wiped out. So
I never knew that.
Yeah, no, that's
nice, mate. Yeah. So that was it. Post that.
How did you leave Diego Garcia?
Sorry?
How did you leave? What was the reasons for leaving?
See now. I knew you were going to try and pull me on this one. So I think it's probably fair to say I was a little bit of a rebel in my days in the Marines, and I was mischievous, lovable rogue. I think it's probably the best way.
Maybe just time to leave. Probably better.
It was time to leave, but if it was either. Fortunately, I managed to survive my year-long draft. A lot of lads don't survive the year-long draft because they end up in various different misdemeanors. But yeah, I mean, it's as you all know, Pete, I had a charge sheet. It was longer than my arm in many, many ways. Nothing malicious, probably just a few little drink-related misdemeanors. But yeah, no, I managed to stay the whole year, just about.
And that was it. Post that, done with Marines.
Post that, I'd gone back to 4-2 Commando. Was there a month. Said I'm done. Threw a tantrum. Put my notice in and was too stubborn to take it out. So I ended up going back to Norway in the January, trying to do a full Arctic warfare deployment.
Straight after Diego.
When you got your notice in as well was pretty tough. Ended up getting in a little bit of trouble there as well. Yeah, so led several Marines astray, let's just say, and caused a bit of a riot in the company bar. That cost me 2 weeks' pay, 2 weeks restricted privileges. That's when I knew it was over. I was like, it's time to call it a day.
It's weird how me and Dunk's both never been charged. Maybe we were better at getting away with stuff.
Yeah, I was always leading from the front, see.
Oh, good memories, mate. Yeah, kind of the person, or any cap badge or the Marines makes you kind of intersects into the rest of your life, really, doesn't it? We wouldn't be sitting here now if we didn't all share the same background.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, brilliant memories. You only remember the good bits, so. Well,
it's funny, actually. All your best stories come from your hardest times, I think. You remember the time when you're sat in whatever environment you're in. It's why you always look fondly on your training stories and your training dits, as they're known, because ultimately that's some of your hardest times that you're going through. And they're always quite funny, those stories.
You mentioned obviously the piracy bit, and when you tell, obviously people find it interesting. You never really, obviously it kind of sort of faded, didn't it? Really, from about 2013, sort of making a decline as our industry sort of. For a few reasons why piracy sort of dropped, or the amount of companies doing it. Maybe give people a bit of a taste of what a day-to-day life what our life was like.
both
Obviously we both did it for a couple of years, and went around the world.
Bronze and fizz.
Well, I think when you start to peel back the layers and you look at how, like, firstly, if you think about it, I think it's 90% of the world's trade is done by shipping, and it's one of the sort of last areas of, if you will, there's an element of lawlessness to a degree. Well, there isn't. I mean, I say that, when you're on the high seas, if an incident happens, who deals with that? So that's why when the master of the vessel is the the captain of the vessel. They're effectively the law of that particular land that you are on at that moment in time. And I think with the dynamic of that job, it was always quite interesting because certainly, we're team leaders, when you're running a team, but you're also the advisor to the captain. And the captains, what they say, that goes essentially. But sometimes you're at odds with the captain. So I always found that as a bit of a strange dynamic, just from a job and a lifestyle standpoint, where you're literally there to help protect the lives of those people at sea, whilst doing something that is borderline. Well, it's borderline illegal in many, many ways, because, like I say, you're picking up weapons from one country in many instances, you're dropping them off at another, and that's why you saw these sort of floating armories come. So I found that really fascinating, just as a job. I thought this is really interesting.
Even advising, I used to find how you're advising a captain to change direction, add a couple of days to a trip. changing like the price of oil on a vessel and the difference of time it takes and the extra cost of being at sea for that time, and I like the power you had actually going, look, we should go this way.
Yeah.
For this
It's in the
reason.
hundreds of thousands a day.
I think it's something like $30,000 a day. $30,000 a day in fuel is what a typical tanker would be. So I think the deciding thing for me though was I'm pretty sure I caught myself talking to myself on the bridge wing, trying
we all did that.
plan and plot what it was on fuel. I thought, this is it, I'm done now, because there was an element of boredom. But I don't think I've ever been fitter. I don't think I'd ever been healthier in terms of just
Mauritius, Maldives, Seychelles, Sri Lanka, Muscat, kind of all them places. Amazing time, and obviously the money was
great, especially when we were there. I think we were in there at exactly the right time. But yeah, I mean, I remember boarding a vessel in Madagascar. I remember getting caught in Sri Lanka. I felt a bit guilty actually. I remember, and this was the days when they paid us when we were off as well, off the vessel. So I remember getting caught in Sri Lanka for about 10 days. And I remember like holiday makers coming on the beach and we were like waving the holiday makers off as they're finishing their holiday. We've been there just solid. Paid. Yeah, just stuff like that. You can't make it up really. Yeah, I mean, it was good fun there.
It was also, it wasn't just something, it was actually a real legitimate problem as well. There was like, might be wrong, like 52 ships hijacked in 2011. There was, there's 1 week, there was 4 ships hijacked. It wasn't something that was just made, but collectively, if you're involved in all the sort of piracy attacks, you would have been pretty busy, if you were. But
it died down pretty quickly.
Yeah, it was. If you'd done sort of 50 transits, you may have had 2, 3, 5 incidents.
Well, I think we became a victim of our own success massively. I think there was a combination of several things. I mean, one, obviously, there was a huge Navy presence as well. So there was the European naval forces. You had, transits there that were going that would escort vessels going through the high, the
high risk area.
Gulf of Aden, that stretch, and then you had that sort of Bab el-Mandeb bottleneck, which is sort of pirate infested waters. You then had effectively a 4-man security team who had the higher ground. You were armed. The odds were stacked against the pirates who probably malnourished. There's only so much fuel that you can operate to run. So we became a victim of our own success. But you haven't solved the problems in Somalia. You haven't solved the problems in Yemen, and I think that will always. I think that will always resurface as a problem. That's
still going on now. There's still companies out there putting teams on.
They're doing different models on it.
And I think there's different ways you can deal with that problem. Look at drone, by utilising drones.
In our time, no ship was ever getting anything over 16 knots was pretty much unboardable, wasn't it? Kind of if a ship could go that fast. Yeah. But obviously, if a captain didn't have an armed team on and pirates were firing, they would slow down out of fear and everything else. Where you could almost just, even if you were going to fire that, you can almost just tell a captain, look, keep it at 18, 20 knots. It's impossible for the board. Even just showing your weapons, they would just move to the next vessel. You couldn't afford an armed team.
So I remember my very first transit, and this just shows you that how the industry had, I'm quite fortunate, we are quite fortunate that it was founded, if you will, dare I say it, by Royal Marines, who are a little bit more calm-headed, I think, than maybe others. I remember my very first transit going through the Bab el-Mandeb, and I'm on watch, and it's sort of coming up down to dusk. Next thing, there's 3 skiffs coming hurtling towards us, and I'm like, getting on the net, TL, blah, blah, we've got skiffs coming. He's like, don't worry about it, they're just fishermen. But, somebody who doesn't know that on their first transit.
How can you tell the difference?
And they were hurtling, and I'm not joking, 25, 30 knots.
Yeah, even now with the mothership, it works the same sort of...
Correct, And things like that, where you think, I'm quite thankful I've got an experienced team now behind me. So that was, your first transit, and then several other transits. And, I did have a few suspicious approaches. But again, it's a bit of a process, isn't it? You put your weapon up, you put your hoses on, and they'll just stay further back. They know they can't. And then that's it.
One of the first jobs me and Dunks did was, in the early days of it, was working on LNGs, liquefied natural gas, where we got on there and they're like, oh no, you can't have weapons.
Yeah,
we were like,
can't be pinging off 7.62.
So you had to like, make a weapon
Yeah, they wouldn't go up. You'd have
to make it look like you got a weapon, which is like, oh, this is why we pay you more on this one, because you don't get weapons. But they could travel 24 knots anyway.
Yeah, there's no chance they would get on them.
Well, I had another one as well, which I don't know. We're going into sort of anti-piracy stories now, but yeah, literally just got out of Oman. I had a little Indian captain. He was a little bit nervous, but he was very much, I'm the boss, as in he's the boss. He was like that with everybody. So you knew the sort of captain that you'd have. I'm not joking. We're about 3 miles out of the port in Muscat. He starts bouncing up and down. I mean, it's pitch black. Well, it's not pitch black, but it's dark. It's coming. It's dusk time, but he starts bouncing up and down. It's like, Omar. My nickname is obviously Omar, as you know. He's like, Omar. I'm like, what's up, Captain? He said, they are pirates. I'm like, thinking, okay, no, they're not. It's an Omani fishing dhow. He's like, they are pirates. He says, you must shoot them. I was like, well, what's the captain? I said, Captain, we do that, we're both going to jail. I said, one, they're not pirates, it's an Omani fishing dhow. Two, it's about 3 miles away on the radar. It's like literally, it was about 1.5 miles away. He's like, shoot them. I said, point blank, no. And then I'm having to give him a lesson on how, the range of a 7.62 old SLR. And he's just like, when you try... But apparently the previous security team on there told him that these things had a range of like 1 mile or something. I'm like, I said, Captain, sorry. But again, that's why I think coming from the background that we did, it helped to evolve that and solve that problem.
Yeah, and it was just to sort of finish off this, wasn't it? There was a complete spectrum of different companies working. Some as PVA, which was like the private version of the Marines, 900 guys.
Well, it caused major problems.
Amazing kit and equipment, their own vessels, bases all over the world. And then on the other scale of that was some real sort of cowboy outfits. I say cowboy. They kind of always kind of got away with it, really. But you were picking up weapons in different African countries, and it wasn't so. The industry
faded quickly, though, didn't it? It was so high, and you're like, "Well, it's right this way," but you knew it was going to change.
Yeah,
so everyone just done cut.
Well, and hence, when I got the call from Pete, I was done.
Similar, mate.
Like the PVI thing was a major problem for the Marines because I think they were sort of being described as like the 4th Commando unit, weren't they, at one point? Because
everyone was leaving, weren't they?
Hemorrhaging people to go into it. But yeah, you did see a lot of cowboy organisations and, obviously competition laws and everything else. But I do think that they just ended up completely undercutting each other to the point that there just didn't seem any form of association to try and grip it. But hey ho, it was fun to be a part of. Even I wouldn't go back to it.
Part of the journey, mate.
Yeah, even when the threats staying the same, people just eventually start paying less than they. It's just how it works in business. All right, Sharif, I suppose let's go back a little bit. Obviously, jumped a few different areas that hopefully people find interesting. Obviously, you were the original sort of designer and curator of the SRMC, which obviously this is the common theme that runs through the podcast. Obviously, me and Duncan, we obviously live and breathe it, and what it means to us. But what was your sort of original concept of what did you see? What did you think we were doing there? What was your idea of where you could take that? I know you had a bold vision for it, but maybe none of us believed it really. But none of us believed we were going to get to 2,000 people, I suppose.
No, and to be honest with you, Pete, I didn't think in my wildest dreams that it would go to where you guys have taken it. So massive kudos to that. For me, and I think this comes down to there's a price and value component to anything that you do in this world. And for me, I spent a fair chunk of money doing a course similar that I just didn't think ticked the boxes that it's needed for somebody with ambition to really try and move into that next phase of management consultancy. So the big vision for me with the SRMC was teach people current content that's absolutely relevant to the world of corporate security and risk management, which and it definitely veers off into other streams there. Number one. And number two, nothing is more valuable than your network. There's what you know in this world, and there's who you know, and you have to have a blend of both. Nobody is immune from, talent alone is not just going to get you somewhere. You have to be known for the talents that you have, and people evangelizing that either on your behalf. That for me is where the network and the alumni really comes into play. So for me, I would be fascinated to see how many people who've completed the SRMC joined the alumni and then linked other people up for contracts or jobs. That would be a real valuable.
Our whole business is based on that. I mean, that's
and so for me, that's the vision, because there's so many good people out there who just haven't had that opportunity because they've just wrong place, wrong time. Yeah. They may have the skills, they may have the drive, they may have the qualification now. From the SRMC.
Well, qualification is just one part of it.
Well, it's just one part. Yeah,
luck, perseverance, networking, trying to create a community or a tribe of people that have got a bond, so that shared hardship and experience, and people knowing what quality that person is. That the course only attracts sort of.
Well, and it's the quality. Yeah. So you've given the industry a benchmark of quality person that others can tap into, and that for me was where it really was at. Is it's not just about the old boys network. Those days are gone. You've got to. It's got to be a little bit more. Well, it's got to be a lot more substantial than that. And
I think that was a different angle we probably all came from. We were obviously getting old and bold now, but we were pretty young when we all sort of got this going, and we were quite different. Even now, we probably still classed as pretty young in the industry. We've been doing this for 12, 13 years. But as much as we'll happily say how great we are and talk about it, it's not. It's about the reason why the tribe has started and become this alumni and group of people and communities. It all looks after each other.
Yeah, everyone
looks after each other. Someone backfills a job, they'll get someone else from the alumni community, and it's just gone. And for us, I think that's the bit we're probably most proud of. Actually, is the course has led to that. But it's that network of people that are out there, and hence why we're getting them all back. You being the first to talk on this podcast about and see where their journeys have taken them from. It might have just been a conversation on the phone with Pete, and he gave them the best sales pattern in the world. But they just have to look out on all social media channels and see other people talking about it and where it's led them to. So that'd be nice leading on to our next part.
And I think just obviously remembering in building the course itself, we had a lot of frameworks to go after. There was a heck of a lot to help us get to where we were. And it's the one thing I probably overlooked the most is if you think about it, you had 9/11, then you had wars post that, then you had a booming security industry arise from that. This is before you even think about what I would call just corporate security now. You had a booming security industry, you had oil and gas security industry, you had a maritime security industry. So there's a heck of a lot going for us in terms of being able to build that. You had pamphlets, ISO frameworks. A lot of that stuff was already there. It was just trying to pull it all together and now find the right people to be able to present that specific part of the course with practical experience. And I think for me, moving on from where the SRMC, I built the first course, I delivered the first 3, and then Pete and I had to have an uncomfortable conversation because I just said, look, Pete, cards on the table, I got a deep level of imposter syndrome here because I haven't practically done some of the things that we're trying to teach these guys, so it felt very theoretical and academic for me. And whilst I could tell the story and get the point across, I just felt that it needed to probably go in a different direction. Extremely proud of
ironic, me just to jump in there, mate. Obviously not just saying this to be nice, and obviously you're the first podcast guest, but you're actually probably generally one of the best speakers or communicators of teaching. When I described you on the SRMC to people, obviously you're in the cyber world now, which I presume we'll get onto. You could articulate any threat, risk, or vulnerability just as well. I believe, but what's good to know, I suppose the audience to know, is even somebody like you now who's a cyber rock star, we had to phone like 4 of our secretaries just to book you in today. But you know, for someone like, you know, waiting and you are smashing it in your world, especially the role you're in now. It was like that. Even you felt. I know everyone feels imposter syndrome in a different way, but I just thought it was a point worth mentioning to the audience.
I mean, Pete never one to spare me the blushes, so thank you. You know, but
you are our richest friend now, mate.
No, but well, I wish. But no, I think, you know, you've also got to bear in mind that we didn't do this on our own. You know, we did these things together. You know, you, Pete, got me into my cyber job. You also got me into building you an SRMC, if you will. But you guys have taken that to a completely different level, way beyond anything I thought it was really going to go to. And I think that's testament to the belief that you had in growing it and taking it to where it is. You know, and I think this is the reality is none of us get to where we are on our own. You have to, people must help you out along that way. And, you know, my route into cyber, if you want to sort of segue into that, was, you know, once we'd had that conversation, I said, Pete, I'm done. I'm cooked. I just can't take this to the next level that you want. And I said I wanted to fade out of the industry, full stop. You know, I wanted to just go and do something completely different. And I sort of asked you not to tell anyone. And in Pete fashion, I think he probably spotted something that I didn't spot. And he opened up a door into the cyberspace for me. He got me a coffee with my first boss in cyber, a guy called Brian Lord, who was an outgoing deputy director at GCHQ and was brought in to build and form the cyber arm of PGI. So, you know, Brian and I went for a coffee and he sort of said, you know, look, I need someone from your background to be able to basically, we got the guys who were technical specialists. They were deep technical specialists. They'd gone on a train the trainer course, but they weren't quite there. So he sort of said, you know, I need you to sort of bring them along and also get us some accreditation along the way. And interestingly enough, I suppose this is where I've ended up where I am now, you know, and I couldn't even spell cyber at this moment in time. And, you know, Brian I said, look, I haven't got a clue about this space, but, you know, I'm happy to take a leap of faith, if you will. And he sort of, in a roundabout way, basically said, these guys will run rings around you for 6 months, but once you can speak their language. And his exact words to me was, you understand this in a risk contest, and this is just a business risk. So once I could understand that concept, the rest then was a lot of self-learning and trying to decipher what this technical team that I was sort of handed were telling me. And you know, I had 2 pen testers, which are ethical hackers, if you will, who were training that side of the house. I had a malware analyst. What was he? Keith. What was Keith? He wasn't a malware analyst. He was computer emergency response. So he was forensic side as well, but he was an
interesting guy, Keith.
Yeah, he was arguably the one that would run the rings out of me the most. And ironically, he's a guy I still speak to now if I have a cyber problem that I need to decipher.
They were tough. Obviously, remembering from our time, they were a tough crowd to win over, weren't they? Kind of,
yeah,
they were like, you know, they're like the superstars, like they're Premiership footballers in their space, and and they kind of, a lot of them can have big egos because they're top of their game. Yeah, and they're coming in from a completely different space shows, you know, how well he did that. Really, you know, for 6 months you were trying to wear Transformer t-shirts and Thundercats.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest compliment I got was I got to stop telling you stuff now, boss, because you know a bit too much. So I thought, well, that was quite a good compliment to get, and that was it really. And I think for me, how I was able to, I figured to myself, if I could understand this and explain this in a language I can understand, I can get other people to understand it. So that really was, you know, where, and I needed a little bit along the way. You know, I needed a springboard, if you will. So I was never going to do that at PGI because, quite frankly, they've got cyber people who are going to be far better at I was never going to break into delivering cyber training on their behalf. For me, the springboard was the cyber insurance industry, which is where I ended up after.
How did that happen?
After PGI.
I remember it happening, but
yeah. So a few things sort of changes with PGI Cyber, and just there was a few things that we didn't quite get right. Which we could have. We did win some interesting contracts again out in the Middle East, which were very much geared. Which, coming full circle, is sort of a lot of the stuff I do now in terms of developing cyber programs, academies, that sort of stuff. But anyway, I got headhunted by. And this just shows you how little I really knew about insurance and cyber and just a whole load of other things at the time, but cyber insurance in particular. I got headhunted by someone in the city, and I went for they said, well, how do you fancy going into underwriting? I thought, underwriting? I was like, I've heard of it. I don't really know exactly what it is, but and then I sort of thought back to the maritime security days and Lloyd's of London but I didn't really know what it was. It was still a little bit of a mythical beast, the whole Lloyd's of London thing. So once I've done my research, I'm looking at underwriting. I'm thinking, well, you look at like car underwriter or home insurance. And I was like, I said, no, not really. So I sort of phoned the guy. I said, look, this feels like it'd be a bit of a step down. And in fairness to me, he just went, he said, don't be an idiot. He said, this is not a step down for you, I can assure you. Go and meet this guy.
Yeah.
And have a chat with him. So I met with this guy. His name's Dan Truman, who ended up being my boss. And it was a similar thing, really. He said, I know I need someone like you, but I don't know exactly what for yet. But if you're willing to sort of take that leap of faith. So he brought me in as a sort of, and he was a real visionary. And he's gone on to have a hugely successful career in the cyber insurance industry. He brought me in to sort of be the cyber unit training manager, so to train up the underwriters, which I thought was when I look back on it, to have that sort of foresight and to be able to business case that internally, because it's a highly regulated environment. If I'm not somebody who's earning money, if you will, for that specific unit, then you're a cost in many instances.
Just to explain, I suppose, the audience, what you were training, so you got people writing insurance policies, as underwriting insurance.
Yeah.
And then you obviously you got technical cyber people. You were teaching them to understand.
I was the technical cyber person.
You were technical, yeah.
I was the technical cyber person. I was the guy that they brought in to be the cyber.
So they can understand how to price that.
Correct. So well, you'd have your actuaries who would develop the pricing models in which that they would underwrite to. So you have your obviously policy wording, which your underwriters. A senior underwriter would write those policy wordings. The broker would then sell those policies, and that's known as your product. But then you would have, and bearing in mind, this is Lloyd's of London syndicate underwriting. So this isn't car insurance now. You're writing multi-million-dollar policies. Usually, most of the business, 90% of the business at the time was the US.
Quite complex as well, I suppose, with cyber insurance. It just keeps going on and on, doesn't it? You know what I mean? As in, a company goes down, the effect it has on the next company.
Well, that's when you start to move into systemic risk and cyber catastrophe type risk. Then yes, in the theory or the practical way in which that works is the Lloyd's of London market. Effectively, the fortunes of the many pay for the losses of the few is essentially how insurance works in that space.
That's good. We use that one. Your role there was to understand the cyber threat landscape and communicate that to underwriters.
And help the underwriters underwrite the risk, because these guys were not technical specialists. They didn't have access to to the teams that I had previously. So for me, I was able to explain and work with them, and you're understanding controls, you're understanding risk, you're understanding resilience, and when all of those things fail, what is it then that your insurable loss that you're going to be paying out? But I think that role then very quickly evolved into, because I wrote a cyber course there, which was the day that I would then deliver on the SRMC. So I wrote a course then, which was quite unique, because then I figured, well, we got to underwrite the risk, but we also want our brokers to be able to better sell the risk, because then they would bring us better risks.
Yeah.
To insure if they can sell it better, and obviously then
More money.
It's a value add for the market. So I would train up the brokers in cyber risk. They would go out and sell it. So I got it, NCSC, or it was GCHQ certified back then, but the NCSC certified training scheme, which is what we put some of our courses through at PGI as well. And then from that, I became a bit of a market asset. So I was able to it was great, flying all over the world. I went as far as Colombia, Ecuador, Bermuda, all over the US. I, if you will, I became technical pre-sales for cyber insurance.
Didn't you end up speaking with George Bush?
Well, so technically speaking,
for a second,
same stage.
Was I the speaker before George Bush spoke as a keynote speaker at the Marriott World Hotel in Orlando? Yes. Was I one of 80 speakers previously? So I spoke at a healthcare conference called the Blue Cross Blue Shield. It's an annual healthcare. So I had a little slot.
Good guy.
The day before. And then, I was fortunate enough to listen to George Bush speak, sat about sort of 15 metres or 20 metres away from him. So, it was funny. It was good.
He always was quite funny. Well,
it was funny.
He made a few mistakes, but
but no, he was funny. It was good to listen to. And hey, not many people get to listen to a president speak from the horse's mouth, who happened to, I was speaking the day before. That is an absolute fact. So yeah.
So cyber was never on your radar as like an area to go into. That was just that sliding doors moment, as in
not
it was just
ever
suggested, and you went, I'll have a look, and then
no,
you must have had we both ended up doing one of the same courses together.
The CISP, CISSP.
And you were like, I've got a hunger to go and learn more about this. So I was like, I need to understand it, but it's not
you
for
were
me.
the opposite, weren't you?
I was like, it's not for me. As in, you're either going to really enjoy going down that route, which we get with a lot of SRMC students. Obviously, it's a lot because they're attracted by the finance and the money rewards in that industry, because as it is at the moment, it's still highly rewarding, but it's not for everyone. But actually, there's more people that have got a skill set that do really well in there than they realise. It's not all about the technical specialists, is it?
No, and remember with cyber, there are so many different facets, right? Yeah. You've got the engineering side of cyber, in terms of the building, the making, the doing of cyber security. You've got a massive jobs market out there. But you've also got, the area that I went into, the technical pre-sales component, being able to communicate in a language that a buyer will understand, because that's half of the battle. In cyber, people will not invest. People will do one of two things in cyber. They'll either throw money at the problem because they just don't understand it and they'll bury their head in the sand, or they won't invest in it because they don't understand the problem, and the people that are trying to communicate that problem to them don't understand the business side of that. So that was my area, really, in terms of being able to bridge that gap. Is I understood enough to be dangerous, but you were never going to let me loose on the keyboard for too long. I think it's probably where that is my. I suppose that's where I sort of pin my colours to the wall. Is where my skill set is being able to get the point across to arm people with enough information to then invest in this space. And from the SRMC, there's a few case studies of guys who've they approached me after and said, look, I want to get into this space. And interestingly, some of them have decided to go down the technical route, and they're doing very, very well in that space, and they weren't technical before. And then, again, I'm not teaching them technical skills. I'm just saying, here's the direction of travel you want to go. These are some of the tools to look at. These are some of the resources to go after. Learn to speak that language, and with tenacity, you will get there. People just have to want it hard enough. The jobs market is there in cyber, and the problem isn't going away. We're not going to use less technology. As I always say on all of my courses, we live online, work online, shop online, play online. This world is not decreasing in terms of the problem space. And, there will always be a place for cybersecurity.
You seem to pick a forever job, unlike your Piracy job, which you mentioned earlier on, which wasn't a forever job, but you've got a job that's just going to keep getting bigger for you.
Well, maybe, provided I stay relevant. At the end of the day, because you've got
to evolve fast in that industry.
Well, the reality is this little known beast called AI has just completely changed the game. It has completely thrown. It's arguably the biggest human innovation that we don't even fully. We have no idea where this thing truly is going to go.
Yeah, scary.
And I'm 10 years in cyber. I'm a dinosaur, maybe in some respects.
Well,
so
I know you've I know you've got obviously mentioning your role you do now, but I know there's a training theme that goes running through them. But you've evolved, and in each of them things have been quite different, haven't they? Every space you've been in, obviously, it's got the similar risk, cyber kind of training, but they're all they are not, none of them jobs really. People you would actually, they're all very different.
Yeah, definitely. I think the PGI Cyber Days was very much about trying to launch academies. It was trying to launch large scale
government overseas
government, national capacity building of government organisations, that side of life, and then the idea would be capability transfer, giving that host nation the capability to then go and do its own thing. Fast forward, I'm sort of back to that now. So I now work for a company called the SANS Institute. So SANS is the world's largest and most trusted provider of cybersecurity skills training.
Plug there.
Sound like a salesman then, mate.
Well, I am. And this is it. So, 35 years old. And I now, come full circle. I'm back working with the military, working with the UK MOD, working with UK police. And still trying to do the same thing, in terms of trying to build academies, trying to build that workforce transformation. Not just here's my catalogue of here's my catalogue of courses, away you go. It's come full circle, but yes, there's always a theme of training, education that runs through that. And I'm very fortunate now to have, if you will, the biggest platform in SANS to be able to, it is the most trusted in this space. So, but it comes back to that sort of price and value component. With SANS, we are known for being at the premium end of that market.
Reassuringly expensive.
Yeah. But you're at but at the end of the day, it's a bit like if you start to invest. Like for me, I stumped up 6K 12, 13 years ago for a course that by and large I wasn't fully happy with, if I'm being completely honest with you. But you can do one of two things. I can sit there and drip and moan about that, or I take the positives. Yeah. We go and build our own version of that in terms of the SRMC, and that has given me a springboard to. So, and I think that's the crux of these sorts of things is, anything can be expensive if you don't utilise it to the, if you don't get the value from it and you don't commit yourself to that.
Well, another one to give you another chuck up, I suppose, is when you took your last role, the one you're in now. Obviously, I can't remember you deciding whether to take it or not. You saw, this is again for the audience, but you saw your biggest weakness was around sort of numbers, understanding of that area of business, because you didn't really have that too much in your roles previously, of running your own P&L and everything. And part of the reason, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm remembering this wrong anyway, part of the reason why you took the role you're in now, because that was going to be a big part of your job going forward, and you're like, I want to attack that and not have that as a weakness in my game.
Yeah.
Where and now it's like you are the numbers man, which was ironic because you wasn't before.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I've always been very fortunate to pick my own bosses. Pete, you were, my first in terms of picking my. Obviously, from the military, you don't get to pick your bosses then. It's, but really since I sort of, if you will, dived 2-footed into this space. Not just cyber, but generally, it's you've got to pick somebody. Or for me, I'm not very good at being managed. You've got to leave me alone. Point me in the right direction. Get the hell out of my way. And pick me up if I'm going too left or right of arc of what it is that I'm supposed to do. But typically speaking, just get out of my way. But this was the biggest leap in terms of I knew that that numbers are what make the world go round in terms of business. It is.
Yeah.
You've got your product, but ultimately every single business has to grow. No business can stay stagnant. It has to grow. So when you start to commit your mindset to say, right, now I have to grow this business because the numbers matter, and with that, numbers are what pay people's salaries, and it also contributes to your R&D that feeds back into your product set. So for me, yes, it was a massive, leap.
Growing or you're dying.
Sorry?
You're either growing or you're dying.
Correct. Yeah. So
that's right. I suppose we need
final thoughts.
Yeah, final thought.
Like Jerry Springer.
Jerry Springer style. Need to finish off with some takeaways for the future. Like your advice for people going into this space or along those sort of lines.
So are you? Well, I suppose advice in terms of. If you look at let's take that SRMC crowd. What are you up to now? What number?
I think we're just shy of 2,000 people have gone through the program.
2,000.
Yeah.
And I think,
face-to-face plus the all onliners.
SRMC 62 was out.
SRMC 62. So
just like the UFC, every course got a number.
Yeah. How many have you got in the next course?
55 in the next one.
55. Okay. So I think, certainly I can speak from the courses, and I know I've not spoken as an instructor on the course for a while now, maybe a year or so. But, I can only speak from some of the people I've trained on there, and from my own experiences. You've had people I know of. You've had people from some of the world's largest companies. I remember there was a guy from CNN, wasn't there? There was the other guy from was it Sony Movies or something like that as well?
Yeah, Sony. Anything.
So I think you've got to work out what you really want to do. You don't really have to do that. Sometimes it will take you in a completely different journey. No, I never knew I would sort of end up in cyber from doing, a course of a similar flavour. I think my advice is you've got to keep chipping away at it. Don't get disheartened if don't go on an SRMC course and then expect that that's it. Now you're going to land your security management job. You've got to get out there. You've got to be in your market. You've got to keep chipping away at it. If you want to go in the cyberspace, there's two routes. Well, there's several routes, but there's the technical route. There's the non-technical route. If you're going to go down the technical route, you've got to download the tools. You've got to play with the tools. You've got to keep chipping away at that. People say, it's okay to fail and all that sort of stuff. I don't agree with that. I think it's not okay to fail. You've got to try and it's okay to have setbacks, but you've got to keep forging forward. When you go into a room like an alumni event, you've got to walk away with 5 friends. It's things like that where you've got to just you don't think you can do it just purely by yourself. I always remember in the security, and it used to wind me up actually. You'd get people say, I'm not going to put my name to that person, or I'm not going to put, you don't have to. Open the door and let them do it themselves.
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
what I mean? Sometimes there's so many people who get so protective over their own personal brand.
Or so closed, their way of thinking, I think.
Yeah.
It's a funny industry for that, and there's a bit of a sceptical side in the elements of it.
Yeah.
They just don't want to put their name to anything.
Like a good networker we all know, which will remain nameless, but I always remember the kind of networking, which I think we all share the same thing, is about giving more than you ever wish to sort of receive back.
Yeah.
If you're that way, obviously now and again you're going to get burnt, but don't change the person you are just because you're operating in business. Where some people see it. Obviously, it is. I don't know. See it in a very competition way of where they're very untrusting and sort of. But you ain't gonna you're only going to get so far in life if it's just you, or kind of life is about.
All the success stories have come from the people that have networked the best.
Yeah.
And all the examples.
It's
come
not
out and
just
name
what
names, but the people that
it's-
have gone down the media route, they're the ones that have gone, I'll buy everyone a coffee and I'll go and meet them, and someone will give you the time of day. It's the people who've, I could put that down. Every single success story we've got that's gone through the SRMC that's doing really, really well now.
Brilliant
have all
network.
had that similar thread through it, where they've networked really well and they communicated it and they got out to the right people, and they've forged a path that it's not going to be completely linear, but they found a way into what they really want to do, and they're focused on a goal and got there. And you being one, mate, you focus on that was it. You were going down that cyber route, and you might have, probably gone somewhere where you didn't necessarily see yourself going in insurance, and then where you are now. Especially Pete will say that, the job you're doing now, you definitely wouldn't have thought about doing that.
You're head of law enforcement, mate, and if you remember,
I'm not the head of law enforcement. Let's just.
It's not your title, head of law enforcement.
He's known for making up titles.
Defence, military, and law enforcement for the SANS Institute.
Cool. But having law enforcement title compared to the Sharif Gardner we talked about in Garcia, does seem a bit. But also that just shows the you are like, and numerous people other people who come on the first week of the podcast. Your people like your Pete Klein, your Mark Grant, your Anthony Sherlocks, who really sort of, it's not cunning, but like they invested almost like at a cost to go, right, this is who I'm going to become. And I know I can only go so far by doing it. I've got to invest in meeting people for a coffee, sharing ideas, helping people out. And actually, it's kind of like social media where people are like, because they don't see the instant return from it. Oh, don't do that. Because,
open doors for people, it's still down to them to walk through it. The amount of people, and I've been very fortunate, and it does genuinely makes you feel good. People who come up and say, "Oh, Sharif, thank you for linking me up with this person." It's down to them after that. I can't do any more. I'm not putting my name to say because I've not necessarily worked with that person, but I'll open a door all day long for someone. It's down to them, especially someone who's invested in themselves. And I think that's the thing, with the SRMC, if I can see somebody's invested in themselves, they clearly want to do something with their lives that specific course will take them. And it's the same, with SANS, I look at SANS is quite similar to Frontier Risks and the SRMC. SANS is a community organisation. Sorry?
It's a little bit bigger than us, but...
No, but the model in some respects is quite similar in the sense that you have world-class training, and that's backed up by a massive community, like a huge community. The alumni is like 40,000 a year, I think, in something
similar.
But the point is a whole load of stuff that SANS will give back to the community because it matters, it helps. But it's down to that community to network with each other to solve their own problems. I think my other advice, certainly for the demographic that I know will end up on the SRMC, the military demographic, you've got to learn to sell yourself. Too many people in the military are nervous about putting themselves out there. They don't want to seem a bit corny, a bit cheesy, a bit, they can sometimes be a little bit too reserved. You're going to have to rip up the rule book a little bit because the best person to sell yourself is fit for you to sell yourself to a degree. And I know that's quite a tricky thing to do. I've been fortunate enough to work with guys. I've been fortunate enough to work with people from the same background as us, the Royal Marines. I've pretty much worked in my whole career. I've managed to work with people from that background, and ironically, you get some of the most diverse people from a Royal Marines background. So even though I've to a degree stuck to my own in many instances. It's worked for me. Don't get me wrong. I've made mistakes as well with Royal Marines in sort of hiring and things like that. But by and large, it's been a good demographic for me to pick from and work with because again, there's just that attitude of excellence. There's the whole sort of commando values bit of cheerfulness in adversity and all of those things. You're getting that as a base benchmark of person that you're going to work with. So help each other out. You've got to help each other out, but equally people have got to help themselves out and they invest in themselves as well.
Touching on what you just said, but I might not articulate this as well as I should perhaps, but we've had this conversation before. When somebody's come, you're proud of your background you've got, which I think is a negative for some people. They can't leave it go. If you wanted people to know you've got a Royal Marine background, you'd let them know in a certain way. But also, you could easily never know that you were ever in the military or anything before. Where some people, I think, struggle with obviously their identity is strong and and it becomes a negative where they can't let it go almost, in that, where business doesn't really care that you've done X, Y, Z. So
you're not owed anything. I think that's the bit that you quickly find out that it almost...
The market doesn't care.
It's not that it doesn't matter, because certainly there's some values and skills and leadership qualities, all those bits that you have from a lengthy career, and equally some of the people we've seen that have done the best in this industry have been the ones that had a very short career and have gone out there probably maybe with a bit more hunger or didn't feel like they were owed something. I think that's a common theme as well.
For me, the best people that I have found in this space, whether military background or not, but mostly from a military background, because I can make those connections. Do not dine out on your successes and failures for too long. Like, it doesn't help you. People aren't that interested eventually. Like, people are interested to a point, but if you dine out on those too long, they're not interested. So when it comes down to failures, pick yourself up, dust yourself off. Don't accept failure, in my opinion. If you want to go after a career in whatever space it is that you're going after, you've got to own that. You've got to grip that. You've got to chase that career, because nobody else is going to do that. Most people I've met will give you the time of day for a coffee. Sometimes I'm terrible at getting back to people, but pin me down in the right position, and I'll always try and help somebody in that sense. But equally, don't sit there dining out on the successes. I don't sit there walking around with a badge that says SRMC creator because that's your course and that's your successes. You've got to be able to just move on to the next thing. Don't expect a leg up. Although, hopefully if it all goes wrong for me, I've got a job back with you. I've got a job back with you guys,
Well, we needed a cleaner, didn't we?
Yeah. So, and hopefully these things come full circle, but don't expect them to come full circle. You've got to make it work for yourself. And that's probably my closing bit on that.
And I suppose just to finish off, very last point, unless you've got something to say, one of the key things that people probably don't know about you is the dancing thing, like to the ballet dancing.
It's in the heritage, right?
In the heritage somewhere. There's nobody I know. There's nobody I know that can move like you.
Yeah, I'm arguably that that's one success I will dine out on.
And hopefully somebody will see this podcast now and ask you to produce this, because obviously it rarely comes out, but when it does, mate, it is something.
I will make you laugh. Both of my boys are desperately trying to learn how to moonwalk, and they're 9 and 7, well, soon to be 10 and 8, and they're getting there. Certainly, my eldest he's very, very close. And
I'm born on the same day.
Yeah, that's
born on the same day. Yep.
Which I just told somebody about.
Yeah,
pretty cool. That is.
Talking of birthdays, it's Pete's birthday today as well, mate. So.
Yeah.
52.
40 today.
Been saying he's 50 for years, but people still going with it.
44.
Not quite there yet.
44
and hanging out. 44.
You look
Good
well.
point to end, mate. I think, we'll keep watching your journey, mate. I'm sure there's another little sweep right or left in it somewhere where you're going to end up doing something completely different. But
no,
in the cyberspace. But
I'm definitely, 41 years old now. I'm the veering off for now is. It's not on the agenda.
Is that in case the bosses are listening?
No, it's a genuine. I'm quite settled, and that's the other thing as well. I will say, just one final thing: don't be bouncy. Too many people, For me, if you're going to make a success of something, you've got to stick at it. You've got to try and make it a success. Typically, in my, whether it's the same company or the same role, you've got to really try and land, be productive and get it in a better space than you took it on, and somebody else to maybe take it on. And I found certainly in the cyber insurance industry, I think that we created, certainly my team that I had there, we created something brand new that hadn't really been done before. But that they then went to take it on to the next phase. But you've got to, things take time as well, but not too much time. But you've got to keep chipping away.
Great.
Big thanks for doing today, mate. Obviously, couldn't be more fitting the person. The very first podcast is the guy you created SRMC One, and obviously the podcast is around the SRMC Tribe, and couldn't be more fitting. Big thanks for giving us your time today, and eventually agreeing to do it.
Awesome.
Pleasure. Thanks,
mate. Time for a beer. Cheers.
Thanks, lads.